The ability to create and maintain high-performance teams is critical for any organization or project in today's complex and competitive business environments. The question, what makes a great team great, has been a hot topic in business and academia for many years. Today, we're going to explore this a little bit. My name is Paul Ebbs. I'm a lean specialist with WSP Middle East, and in this episode of WSP Anticipate podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by my mentor and friend, Dave Umstot. He's a lean coach, he's an author, Adjunct Professor in San Diego State University, and President of Umstot Project and Facility Solutions. Today, we will discuss some of the critical factors required to set teams up for success by creating and maintaining high-performance teams. There's a mouthful, Dave, huh?
Well, thanks, Paul. I'm glad to have the opportunity to share with you and the listeners today.
Maybe we could start with just giving us a little bit about your background and some of your career to date, because it's been pretty expansive.
Yeah. So, to give the listeners a little bit of background, I'm an engineer by training. I spent 20 years, a better part of 20 years, designing and building things throughout the world, including the Middle East, Europe, and throughout North America. I spent 10 years as a public owner here in California, and during that time, we put $2 billion worth of construction in the ground for educational facilities, for both for kindergarten through what we would call secondary school, as well as at the college level. And over the past 8 years, we've been working with project teams, last count 80 plus, throughout North America and Europe, delivering lean projects, most with the goal of doing so with high performing teams. And that totals over $8 billion worth of construction value during that period of time. So that's a little bit about me. So I come with lots of stories to tell.
Yeah, I know many of them, and there's many more I want to know. So maybe we will start with why, Dave. Simon Sinek, why are high-performance teams important to
Well,
design and construction?
yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute. So high performing teams, well, let's talk about for construction. I mean, we think about construction, we think about inanimate objects, we think about buildings, we think about infrastructure, but they're just things. And how do those things come to be? They come to be because of people. Okay. At least we're not to the point now where
Mm-hmm.
robotics are doing that for us, but people are. And if we look at the productivity in our industry, it's pretty abysmal with respect to other industries, whether we look at the service industry or manufacturing. And it's not because we don't know what we're doing; it's because we're not working well as a team. So that's kind of the crux of why we need to think about high performing teams. So think through if we were building a Toyota. Would we allow everyone in the supply chain to optimize just their piece without having a common vision of how does my piece work and integrate into the rest of the pieces in order to make that automobile? We do that routinely in design and construction, and so high performing teams really allows us to get to a point where we're working in tandem and in unison to a common goal with a common understanding. So that's the why.
Mm. Yeah, well, I can hear a lot of the stuff I've learned from you and with you, particularly with Dan as well. I remember Dan saying that the common denominator in projects is people, and we can't get away from that. Something I always say to people is that we need to have good conversations, and without a high performance team, you can't really have a good conversation. I often say that all the post-its we put on the wall, all the schedules we build, all the plans we build, they're great and we need them, but they don't do any work. People do, and they do through the good conversations that we have.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yep.
how about collaboration? What does it mean to collaborate or really collaborate, as Sutter Healthcare say?
Yeah. So let's explore that a little more deeply. So um, collaboration is how you get to a high performing team to a large degree. And that, how do you leverage the potential of everybody on the team so that project benefits? And the collaboration just doesn't happen. It has to be nurtured. The right environment for that to occur needs to be set up and sustained. And if we want to really kind of do a, kind of a deeper dive into how that comes to be, collaboration is founded on trust. If you don't trust someone, you're not going to collaborate with them. In fact, you may do the exact opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really important when we talk about collaboration that we understand that trust is the foundation. And then the question is how do you get to trust? And we can look at that in a little more detail, but there are kind of three things that I believe really help with building trust. One is developing in what we'll call an environment of psychological safety. There's a lot of research that's been done out of this, out of Harvard here in the U.S., specifically Amy Edmondson. So if the listeners are interested, they can take a deeper dive with that. But the juxtaposition of that is that if you're not feeling psychologically safe, you will not be engaged in participating in discussions or those conversations you were just talking about, and that's problematic. And so, the psychological safe environment means that I can feel safe to share my thoughts, my ideas without, I guess, feeling threatened that something bad might happen to me, that I'm going to be called out. Someone's going to call me, well, that's the most stupid idea I ever heard. So think about that. So where does that go? If someone says, that's the most stupid thing I've ever heard, what just happened? Number
You've just
one,
told them it's a bad idea.
yeah, you told them it's a
Yeah.
bad idea, and so, but here's the worst part of it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so now you've just stifled the input. You're not going to get another idea out of that person ever. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and anyone else that was in that conversation in that room, guess what? You're not going to get any ideas out of them either, because they're going to say, "Wow, I don't want to be like he was or she was," so I'm just not going to say anything. And so how do we get to collaboration if no one is sharing their ideas?
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem. So that's kind of the first point with psychological safety. The second thing that we find is empathy is very important. And so if the listeners aren't really familiar with that concept of empathy, but really learning to see things through the eyes of others. And there are lots of things that teams can do to try and build empathy. But think about a typical construction project. We'll talk about a building rather than horizontal infrastructure. But there may be a dozen, maybe 15 design disciplines. There may be as many as 40 different specialty trades. And each of those has information needs that they require in order to do their job, whether it's design or whether it's to fabricate something or to place something or erect it or assemble it. Um, and if you don't understand what they need or what they're going through, it makes it very difficult for you to provide them the information that they need to be successful. So, uh, developing skills to really understand what the others need, that's where empathy comes to play, really is the second piece there to um, collaboration and building trust. And then the third thing is vulnerability. Okay, and that's something that's difficult for most of us, but being willing to share, and it comes back to a large degree to psychological safety, but being able to share your ideas in a way that and feel that you can do so. I'll tell you a story about a hardened superintendent. You would call him a site manager in your part of the world. But we went to this project. It was about $130 million design build project here in the United States. And they were about 3 months away from completion. And it looked like they had 6 months worth of work to do. And the superintendent uh, was doing the best that he could to get to the end successfully with his team. And the project executive back from the home office goes, Dave, I'd like you to go out there and see if you can help them figure out whether they can really get this done in 3 months or whether we've got a bigger challenge that we have to have. So when I show up on site, the superintendent pulls me into the site trailer in the closed office, closes the door, and goes, "Why are you really here? Tell me what they said." And I go, "Well, what they've told me is that you got 3 months to get this job done, and they're concerned whether it can happen or not. So let's explore that." And I'm not here to report back on you. I'm here to help you. Okay, let's figure out where you're at, and then what we can do to do that. And once he figured that out, that I was there to help, and that I
And
wasn't
listen.
there to do something negative to him,
Hmm.
this 60-year-old old man that had been in the construction industry for 40 years broke into tears.
Mm.
Okay. So that kind of comes back to that whole vulnerability, because the environment was set that, hey, I'm here to help. What do you need? What can I do to help you? It really allowed him to feel comfortable to share and even break down. Can you imagine a 40-year construction veteran in tears? Um, you don't see that very often, and
Mm.
that was just a really good demonstration of how vulnerability can really be beneficial. So kind of to close the loop on that story, they did end up finishing on time, so that was good. But that connection that occurred there through that vulnerability really led to the collaboration that was necessary in order to come up with a plan to make it happen.
I think listening is a key skill of collaborating. I often say to people, you've two ears. I have two big ones in the side of my head, but um, you have two ears and one mouth for a reason, and that's to listen. In Arabic, I say isma. Uh,
Yes,
isma, listen when we're on site. Um, so yeah, I think they're really important points. What I think there's lots of points, really, isn't there? I sometimes come back to uh, Dan, no, um, Dan Pink, yeah, Dan Pink, and drive. So purpose, uh, autonomy, and mastery. So when a team has shared goals or a clear purpose of what they're going to work to together, they've one way to shoot towards. If you have autonomy, so the ability to make those decisions yourself, or link into psychological safety to make a decision and it's wrong, so we learn from it. And then the last one, mastery, just the desire to get better. And I think that's a characteristic of a high performance team. I've read somewhere as well, just that desire for problem solving and continuous improvement. So yeah, there's I think there's lots of things that make us collaborate. So
great.
um, so what about? Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Oh no, I was just going to make another comment tied to your listening, and so
Yeah,
on the listening, really listen to understand. I think a lot of
yeah,
people may listen, but they don't ask questions to
mm,
probe and to understand more deeply what the issue is or how someone is feeling or. I guess listening in and of itself is an
mm,
art, and as you get better at it, you can start to develop a very strong skill set that can really help not only you understand, but others on the team understand what some of the issues may be.
mm. When we listen, it is actually amazing what we hear. So
Hmm.
I've learned over the years from Christine and from Jason Klaus and many others, when we listen to people in meetings, if we just sit back and listen. So back when I was in the UK, when I was embedded in that company in the Northwest, I used to sit there and listen to meetings, and I'd hear, "I'll try," "It should be okay," "I wasn't sure about that." So you hear all these words that relate to understanding or not understanding. Furthermore, so here in the Middle East, when I'm working with teams, my Arabic, as some people will know, is developing a little bit. But I listen out in meetings, and I'll hear Yimkin, maybe, Bashuf, I'll see, or Bahawil, I'll try. So when I say these words back to teams, they go, "Yeah, I hear that all the time." So it's when we listen, I think we can identify things that might not happen as planned. So I think it's a really important skill.
Great.
Okay, so what about strategies to build teams? What kind of strategies do you recommend, Dave?
Well, a common vision of where the team, I mean, what's the team's objective and what's their goal. Okay, so that's probably point one. Okay, so tying that to a construction project. I mean, what's the goal of this project? I mean, what is it going to serve? And I don't mean just a physical asset, but how are the people that are going to be using that going to use it, and what's important to them? So think about an airport. If you're an airline passenger, what is your experience from the time you arrive at the airport to the time that you depart on your flight, and all the elements that go through that? And I won't say all, but almost all of us have flown on a plane at some point in our life. And understanding that this is more than just a physical asset or a space, that there are going to be people using it, and what's important to the people that are there. So kind of coming back to, what's the goal and what's the value proposition for the project, so that everyone has a common understanding of what they're trying to achieve, and then use that to inform the decisions that are made both in the design and construction that support that vision. So that's number one. Number two, kind of tied to that, setting up you'll often hear the term conditions of satisfaction, or conditions of success. But where the team is trying to do there is, how are we going to monitor whether we're on target to meet that value proposition? So are we in a situation where when we get to the end, there's something we can measure? That's great, but how do you know whether you're on track between the beginning and the end? So you need some process metrics somewhere in between there that really help you to evaluate whether you're keeping in alignment with your objectives. And it's through some type of dashboard or visual management system, so the team knows where they're headed. And then, kind of thirdly, what we see more and more teams doing is really capturing how are they going to behave as a team. So, think about that. So there used to be, when there was a book out called "Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten," and that still holds true today. And that a lot of the rules and behaviors, treat others as you'd like to be treated, be respectful. But how is the team going to behave, and what behaviors are in, meaning this is what we want to model, and what behaviors are out. And with that, so kind of wrapping that into a package. One, having a common aligned vision of what the value proposition and goals of the project are. Number one. Number two, some type of metrics that you're going to evaluate as you go, and at the end, confirm that you've met that and use that as part of your decision making. And then thirdly, what are the behaviors that you're going to exhibit and live as a team as you're delivering this particular project?
Yeah, great points, Dave, and I've certainly learned a lot from you, because I've implemented lots of the things that you talk about in practice, at least tried to anyway. The superintendent, a project manager, or the site manager, they're actually the most important people on a project. It's important to have senior leadership support for this, but for me, without the middle management being bought in that this is how we're going to do things, it gets very difficult. My experience when I was working in the UK then, probably 5 years ago, the project we were on. Resistance probably isn't the word. It was almost anger at what we were trying to do. I remember one project manager, we call him Peter, for
Yeah.
example, and people said, "Paul, you'll never get Peter to change." And I said, "Well, I'm not trying to change Peter. I'm just trying to help." And it took a few months, and I remember we had to covertly set up a session, like a collaborative planning session, that Peter didn't know anything about. And there was 12 of us there, and he turned up, and he was red. What's going on? And we says, Peter, it's okay, just sit down. We're just going to talk around things here. So it took me like 45 minutes to do our normal 10-minute kickoff before we do a phase plan. And I knew, based on past experience, that I had to get a Sharpie into Peter's hand. So because he was in sessions before, but he would just sit there with the arms folded. He just sit back and listen, or maybe not even listen. So I knew I had to get a pen in his hand. So what I did was, after the 45 minutes, I asked everybody, okay, who has activities in the next 3 months? And everybody put their hand up. So I went to the person in front of Peter and I says, there's a Sharpie, there's a Sharpie, there's a Sharpie. So now I had a pen in his hand. So Peter was the project manager. So that kind of middle level leadership. And then we had a board up there with all the different color post-its where we get them to sign up before we do planning. And I said, now go up and pick your color. So we picked the color, and then he had his post-its and he had his pen in his hand. And subsequently, during that session, so Dave or Peter, oops, Peter was the project manager, and he had run several. He ran a weekly meeting every single week, and project managers are always pretty good at what they do. And every week he would ask different people in the team, "Are you okay to do that?" And they would say, "Yep, I'm okay." Um, so his schedule didn't have that many items on it, but he would always ask people, "Are they okay?" And during this collaborative planning session, one of his team was up there and he was writing post-its and he was putting them up here, he was putting them there, and he turned to me almost angry to say, "I ask this guy every week about stuff, and now he's putting it all up on the board." And I says, "Peter, it's okay. Let him put it up there." But after that session, Peter came to me of his own free will and says, "Paul, how can we kick this off on this new project?" And I says, "No problem, Peter. Let me help." So, so I think leadership is really important, but it's how you almost motivate or play to your audience, because every person is different, and you have to, I think, play to their concerns and understand those concerns, and then when they see value, that's when the rubber hits the road, I guess, isn't it? So,
Great.
yeah,
I think that's a kind of a great segue into servant leadership, because
yeah,
we were talking what you're queuing that one up really nicely for that, because when we talk about servant leadership, for the listeners, it's really about, it kind of comes back to the empathy thing, but really being in a leadership position where you're trying to provide what others need to do their job. And I will share that the organizations and cultures, organizational cultures that we see, that kind of conclude every meeting or every conversation, well, is there anything else you need from me? Or is there anything else I can do for you? To really gets to the point that from a leadership perspective, are really trying to provide the tools or information or resources or whatever it may be to try and help their team get to high performance. And so that's kind of a key concept that a lot of
mm,
people don't think about. But, for all the listeners out there, try this in your next meeting. At the end of the meeting, say, is there anything else that you need from me? And see what kind of response that you get. It's a very simple thing to do. And if you get in the habit, good things will
mm,
happen. So,
yeah. Fully support that, Dave. And actually, so here in the Middle East, I have a team of 4 people. I'm part of the team. I don't have a team, and they're our team. But we have our weekly meetings, and the team have full autonomy. To be honest, it's a lot easier for me as their leader to say, is there anything you need help with, rather than say, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. There is times when I need some help and I will ask, but it's generally, what do you need me to do to let you do your job? Christine Pasquare, Christine.
yes, I know,
She
Christine.
she calls them path clearers, or us path clearers, as in we're like the game of curling in the Olympics, where
Yep.
the
The
ball is
guys
coming down the
with the
ice.
broom.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So the people in front, they're the new project manager. Yeah, they're the ones who are clearing the path of constraints, which probably leads us to the last planner system, doesn't it? But they're clearing the road so the people who are doing the work can really add the value without these roadblocks getting in their way. So.
Yeah. Well, that's a great. So yeah, the last planner, and while you're describing that, removing roadblocks, I'm thinking about agile frameworks and Scrum and the role of a Scrum master in that. Um, and for listeners who may not be familiar with that, because that's not very common in construction, an agile framework is a planning tool with very short sprints that has been widely adopted in the software industry, and we're now starting to see more use of that in design production. But the Scrum Master is one of several roles on the team. There's a product owner, which kind of ties to what is interfacing with the customer, and that what's important, and really trying to get any kind of decisions or input needed for the team's work. But the Scrum Master's role is to really remove roadblocks, and that's their primary purpose. Is that okay? What's slowing you down? What could help you go faster? What information do you need? And so we typically don't do a really good job of that in construction. So there's some lessons learned for us there that we could potentially integrate and adapt into the way that we do our work.
Mm. I often say to teams that I'm working with here, so we've 33 projects here, 34 at the moment, so a lot of projects and a lot of people working on them. So, but I often say to teams, the work that we do here is actually not that complex. When it boils down, the things we do are not that difficult, really. But getting ready for them, as in making sure the work is ready to execute, is the hardest thing. I think I shared with you Richard O'Connor, who was here before. He introduced a concept called DRAMS as a screen for activities. So DRAMS being design, resources, access, materials, plant, permits, safety, and I added one more S for shared understanding related to my PhD. But teams, they're always pretty good at doing the work, and technically they know what to do. But sometimes the likes of myself and yourself and others around the world, we can help them have good conversations, really. And it's almost building those. I wouldn't say social skills, but it's how to act and behave as a team, almost, isn't it? That really helps protect the project and protect progress, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of a sports metaphor, Paul, as I'm listening to you there, and that is. So if we think about construction or design or the integration of that, everyone knows what they're doing. Some of them are highly specialized expertise that have taken years to learn. So they know what they're doing. The challenge is the integration. And so I'm thinking to a sports metaphor. So you have a football team and you've got a bunch of superstars, but they're all just trying to optimize their own piece, meaning, hey, I want to be the one that scores the goal, and so I'm going to try and dribble through all the rest of the team in order to get down there and create an opportunity. Well, what's the chances of that being successful? Pretty slim, unless you're Maradona once in a lifetime. But if a team, and so I'll go back to the last Euros, where you had Iceland, a country with 300 plus thousand people, gets to the European quarterfinals with no superstars because they played as a team. They understood what their strengths were, and they played to those strengths, and they were successful. Would they have liked to have won the tournament? Yeah, absolutely. But if you want to talk about success, their success was, hey, for a small country, we've demonstrated that our youth soccer program is solid and world class. We can compete at the highest levels, and we still like each other at the end of the day. So all good things that come out of that, and there's some things for us to learn in the way that we go about our projects. That if we behave more like that, I think we're going to have a lot better outcomes.
If I add on to that analogy, is we're not all good at playing different positions, are we? We're well,
Yeah.
I'll say, well, I won't say good or bad, but when we play to our strengths, or we do the things that we love, it puts us in our flow, and we're naturally more productive when we do what we like doing. So, for example, in our team, give me an Excel spreadsheet, I'm going to get turned off. you know, I can look at it, I can do it, but it's difficult for me. If I give it to Shian, he loves it. He gets a buzz out of finishing it. If I want something done straight away, Ziad, straight away he'll do something. We need somebody to talk to somebody in a certain way. Nor can. You want somebody to be energetic. Mansour can. So if I just look at the concept of our team here, we all have different strengths, and we've done some insights things where we're looking at different colors. But on projects, we don't. We all have different things that we like to do and we're good at, but we don't always know the types of people that we have when we start a project. So I think it helps when we can understand what types of people we have in a project.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
So that kind of leads to diversity, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that I think that we also have an opportunity to do more with the diversity that we have, and that the more diverse teams that we work with tend to be higher performing. And when I talk about diversity, we're not just talking about whether you're a man or a woman, or race, or country of origin, or culture. Certainly those things bear into it, but you're going to have diversity with respect to your experience, whether that's life experience or whether that's project experience. You can have diversity
Mm.
with respect to your creative type. I think coming back to your point and what your personality attributes are, you can have diversity tied to where you're at in the organization and from a hierarchy perspective. So some of the best ideas that we have seen tend to come from people that historically aren't given an opportunity to share their voice. And so how do you end up leveraging that potential of the team? And that kind of comes back to where we started, which was, environment and psychological safety, and how do you get to real collaboration? And
Mm.
so diversity is a big piece of that, because the collective wisdom or potential of all of our experiences is much greater than the sum of our individual parts. And I think if I really to look hard at our industry, I think that's our fundamental challenge as an industry, is that
Mm.
we don't do a good job of unleashing that talent, if you will, to get better project outcomes.
Mm. Speaking of diversity, so I'm curious to know your record for the amount of years experience you've had in a workshop to date.
Yeah. So Paul
So
asked this
maybe you
question.
can explain what we do when we kick off
Yeah.
a workshop.
So Paul asked this question, but been doing this for probably 8 years or so with every team that we work with. We ask a number of years of experience from each person, and I think we've had everything from I graduated 3 days ago from university to I've been in industry 46 years, and everything in between. But what we do is we total all that up. And what we find is that normally when we're in a room, we have typically somewhere between 250 to 500 years of experience in the room. That's a lot of
Mm.
construction, design and construction experience to draw on, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But how do we leverage that to the benefit of the project? And to your specific question, Paul, I think the largest number that we've had was over 1,200 years of experience in the room. So 1,200 years, that's more than a millennium. 12 centuries of experience in the room. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Um, that's a lot of experience to draw upon for the benefit of the project, if it is harnessed properly in the right environment is set up to unleash that talent and potential.
Mm. Well, I haven't got to 1200 yet, Dave. I think it was 958. on a project back in the UK about a year and a half ago. But I think that time we had 47, obviously not COVID, but we had 47 people in a room that was not that big. You know, you basically could not swing a cat. I know we were doing a flow walk, so doing some collaborative risk management, and everybody has to move from station to station. And I literally had to say, okay, three, two, one, everybody go right. But it was brilliant. We actually spent, I remember, maybe 6 weeks planning with the team. So this was in design phase. It's probably a good segue into just talking a little bit about the last planner system. But we did a milestone plan for an 18-month long design plan. So this was like a mega project. It was an infrastructure project in London. But we spent, the team put a milestone plan together in maybe an hour, and then the design manager just walked it through, found other things that were missing, captured some big constraints, and then we spent over the next 6 weeks doing some phase plans on their design, just because the last planner works in design just as well as it does in construction, as you know, because you're talking about handoffs. Um, but we spent, I think there was 1,600 post-its on the wall at the end of the sixth week. There was layers after layers on the wall. But the team, without it, they didn't. They probably couldn't have done what they did. And we got some extremely good feedback from it. I don't know. Maybe I have to segue into the last planner system and a brief, I don't know, synopsis of that, Dave, from your perspective. How important is that to teams and high performance teams and projects?
Well, I think that the beauty of the last planner system and the power of the last planner system is that it's the conversations that occur with those that are actually going to be doing the work or planning and doing the work.
Mm,
And that comes back to really harnessing the potential of the team. And if that is done in the context of understanding what our common value proposition is and our common mission, then we can optimize the whole of the project rather than just my piece or your piece.
mm,
And really, those conversations can be very powerful. I was just in Phoenix last week on a project. It's a cold storage facility. So, for those that might not know what that is, it's basically a refrigerated facility for frozen and perishable goods. And Phoenix at this time of year is very much like Qatar. I think it's supposed to be 117 Fahrenheit, so whatever that translates into Celsius today.
hot.
But this was a project, and the team had their kickoff for the last planner system. But when we showed up and were facilitating the discussions that occurred as part of that, there were a lot of data gaps, and they right now in the United States, and I don't know about Europe and the Middle East, but there are material shortages right now that are
Mm,
tied to supply chain issues, which are going to potentially create impact to this project. And so there were breakout meetings to really kind of address some of those issues, which were identified as material constraints as part of that discussion. And then there were some very good conversations about resequencing of work. And that so if people had come with the intent of, well, here's my plan. Well, that plan doesn't work to get us finished by the end of the year. What if we do this? Or what could we do in order to get us to this point at this date? And so those conversations which came out of that gave them a much better, viable plan to achieve the owners, and the owner was actually in the room, said, hey, we have to have this complete by the end of December 2021.
mm,
And this is a rather large facility. And right now, they're literally just out of the ground. They're putting in site utilities. They've got this is a tilt-up concrete structure, so they have casting beds where they're pouring the panels that they'll tilt up after they're cured. But they've got a lot of work to do in 6 months. They've got to get this whole thing done in 6 months. It's a pretty fast-track project. But coming back to your point, Paul, we've been talking about high-performing teams and collaboration, and the last planner system really helps support, both the collaboration and through that collaboration, the potential to get to a high performing team.
Could you become a high performance team without the last planner system on a
Well,
project?
I think the answer is yes, but
Mm,
the last planner system certainly helps that communication. That's
mhm,
current state best practice. I can tell you for sure that you're never going to get the high performance team with the lone genius in the room coming up with
mm,
a 20,000 line item P6
yeah,
CPM schedule and saying, here's our plan,
yeah.
because that's not anyone's plan but his plan. No one's bought into it, hasn't taken advantage of that 1,200 years of experience in the room to say,
Mm,
hey, that doesn't work. We've got to resequence this. Um, I'll share another story. This one's in Europe, but we went to €1 billion data center in Denmark to kick that thing off with the last planner
mhm.
session. First day, the builder shows up in the 6 key trades, all had the same common project milestones. But how many schedules do you think there were, Paul?
Oh,
1 plus 6. 1 plus 6.
yeah,
7. Okay. So there were 7 separate schedules, and each
yeah,
schedule made perfect sense. Okay.
yeah.
Because they were doing it in a vacuum, just really with the information they had, rather than understanding, how the parts fit to one another, and then how they could work that to, hit the milestones and ultimately deliver the project.
Mm,
So, you know, those conversations need to happen. And then the question is how do you do those? Are there other systems besides the Last Planner that can get you there? Yes. But I think the Last Planner really helps facilitate those
mm,
conversations that might not otherwise occur. And if we look at, the metrics from mega projects, meaning projects more than about 650 million euro, the failure rate there is 2/3,
mm,
defined as, failing to meet schedule by, typically a year late,
yeah.
over budget by 10%, you know, um, operational issues more than a year after completion of the project, and those types of metrics. And so, to the extent that we can do a better job of um, trying to mitigate some of those performance issues, Last Planner can be a very powerful tool to help us in that direction.
Mm. For the listeners in the Middle East, my party trick when I go to sites now, when I'm explaining the last planner system, I say Ta Akad Ana Kolshi Jahiz. So be sure everything is ready. So that's all we're really trying to do. We get ready by the conversations that we have, by the things that we do to make sure the activities that are the easy thing are ready to finish, not start, finish.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it's been great, Dave. I think maybe we can keep talking all day about this, but I'd like to know three things that you would guide the listeners to learn more. So, what resources would you guide them towards? Um,
As far as the resources, well, in Qatar, you do have the Lean Construction Institute of Qatar. So I would encourage people to get engaged
mm,
in that community of practice. If I'm certain that there'll be local relevant things tied to that. Certainly, there are a number of international conferences, but if you're interested in learning more about lean, then the Lean Construction blog is available anywhere in the world, provided you've got connectivity. There's a pretty deep resource of different blogs on different types of things. If you're interested in more about the organizational behavior elements, there's a whole host of resources tied to that, but I would start maybe if we went from a deeper dive on psychological safety and high
mm,
performing teams. Amy Edmondson from
mm-hmm,
Harvard has got a great
yeah,
book, and it's
I
called
think I have it teaming, isn't it?
Teaming is the name
Yeah,
of the book. So I
very
would
good.
start there. That's a great place to do that. And so I guess that's my three. Um, and
Okay.
if someone wants to reach out and connect via LinkedIn or have a question, feel free to do so, and I'll get back to you as promptly as possible.
Yeah. I could add a couple of things, I suppose. Well, I'll keep it at three as well. If I think of books, um, I think Team of Teams. It's a
Yep.
hard place. You can't go wrong really reading that, and actually reading it as a team can be really powerful to help people understand that we do work in teams of teams. And that really comes back to the servant leadership piece as well, isn't it? I think eyes
Yep.
on, hands off was the tagline I got from that. Um, we could have, okay, pick one more. Maybe the five functions of or five dysfunctions of a team by Patrick Lencioni is another good one on teaming. And then the last one is your book, Dave. This is not a sales pitch, but so for the listeners, Dave was the lead author with Dan Fauché on a book called Lean Project Delivery Building Championship Project Teams. So the key is in the title, but it's where I learned so much from team building when I was in California with Dave, and I've took it with me ever since, and I'm just I love learning more and more about teams. But if you're interested to learn about lean and high performance teams, I think that's the go-to place to find it. So I recommend going there. And yeah, I think we could go on all day, Dave. But
Yeah. Well, Paul, thanks for sharing this time together. It's always great to catch up, and look forward to hearing how the audience responds to some of the things that we shared today. So
yeah,
everyone out there, be safe. Keep learning every day.
yeah. And then the more you learn, Dave, as you know, the more you realize there's so much more to learn. So maybe as a parting piece, anybody who listens to this, maybe you can pop your takeaways into the chat. So, what did you learn in 12 words or less from our podcast today? Thank you. Shukran.